This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. Nigeria's Boko Haram militants get a chance to reintegrate into society. We have rare access to one de-radicalization center.
My life in Boko Haram was terrible. It was not fair. I found myself living a bad life. I did not enjoy it at all. Only later, I realized being a Boko Haram member was very wrong.
Condemnation in Cameroon as opposition leader and dozens of supporters are arrested. Ethiopia's government is in a legal tussle over patent rights of its ancient grain teff, a national treasure and now superfood in the West. Also in the program, multi-talented with deep roots.
They call me Haji. In these streets, I'm a certified G.
We meet the Somali poet, comedian and playwright bridging intergenerational gaps.
I created Haji. She's one of the characters in my plays, so we can definitely see what the amalgamation of these two art forms, Burambur, hip-hop, could look like.
And in sport, Comoros lodge a complaint about the Africa Cup of Nations. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Let's begin in Nigeria, where a de-radicalization program is helping Boko Haram militants reintegrate into society. Now, those who have voluntarily surrendered to the authorities are being taught vocational skills as part of the rehabilitation program. Well, the BBC's Ishaq Khalid gained rare access to what the Nigerian army describes as the country's sole de-radicalization facility in Gombe State.
This site, somewhere in Gombe State, is what the Nigerian military describes as its sole de-radicalization camp. Mohammed was only 13 years old when Boko Haram militants overran his village and kidnapped him 6 years ago. He tells me he was involved in several attacks on villages until he surrendered to the Nigerian military in 2017.
My life in Boko Haram was terrible. It was not fair. I found myself living a bad life. I did not enjoy it at all. Only later, I realized being a Boko Haram member was very wrong.
The 12-month rehabilitation program is only open to former Boko Haram members who have surrendered voluntarily in return for amnesty. They are being trained in vocational skills like shoemaking, tailoring, and poultry in order to have sources of legitimate income when they are released back into society.
Whenever I reflect on what we did in Boko Haram, I feel very bad. We are seeking forgiveness from our victims, our parents, and the rest of the world. We are now reformed people. We have been reformed in this camp. We need forgiveness.
With a pledge of allegiance to Nigeria, the 154 young men have ended the second round of the program. In the first year, 94 men underwent the program. And according to the army, none of them has gone back to militancy.
I'm very certain that they are not going to go back into the act, considering what the program is designed to achieve. They have been thoroughly prepared, trained, and organized to ensure that they are properly monitored over a long period and with the expectation that it will not have a relapse.
The former fighters that are currently at the camp are to be reintegrated into local communities. Boko Haram have carried out a lot of terrible activities, especially here in northeastern Nigeria. And there is strong suspicion and stigma against any person associated with the group. So one of the major challenges ahead of those de-radicalized and rehabilitated is getting accepted and trusted when they are back into this community. Salamatu Shetima's life has been shattered. She tells me she has lost her husband and 7 of her 8 children to Boko Haram violence.
If they have truly repented and they are sure they will not commit such acts again, I can forgive them. But I will not forget. I will never forget. It is impossible.
There has been an upsurge in deadly attacks by Boko Haram in recent months, and experts suggest that if the same conditions that forced many to join the group are still present, it raises doubts whether these men won't join the militants again. Ishaq Khalid, BBC News, Gombe, Nigeria.
Well, let's bring in Kabiru Adamu. He's a risk management security expert and the managing director of Beacon Consulting Nigeria. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. Would you say that the Nigerian government is finally on track to bringing an end to the Boko Haram crisis?
Unfortunately, no. The focus of the current government and as well as the previous government has been on the military component of the counter-terrorism campaign. The other component, which is the countering violent extremism, under which this Operation Safe Corridor is, has not been given as much prominence, unfortunately.
But you must admit, surely, that this is quite positive. It's a good move, isn't it?
Yes, it's a good move, but like I said, it's not been given that much prominence. All in all, we're talking of about 300 repentant Jamaat al-Ahlissunnah al-Dawat wal-Jihad members. That is really an insignificant number compared to the total number of people that are affected and who could be indoctrinated into terrorism and other aspects of, the kind of security challenges that are in the Lake Chad Basin area.
So given what you're saying, what do you think would be the best approach then?
A combination of both the military approach and then expanding the countering violent extremism approach. What the Nigerian government has done is it has launched an action plan on countering violent extremism, but frankly, the plan has remained in the corridors of government. The other stakeholders, especially the members of the communities that are affected by this terrorism, I don't even know about this action plan. The government launched it in 2018, and it invited government departments, and the instruction was that each government department should set up a desk on countering violent extremism. But if you go down to the rural communities, the various components of the countering violent extremism are unknown to them. Rather, what they see is, for lack of a better word, I would say the high-handedness of security agencies, and as well as, the conditions that give rise to terrorism, especially economic hardships that are abound in those regions.
Let's talk about this program for a minute there, because there are those who are questioning whether the military should really be running them. What is your take on that?
Yes, it's in the first place, if we agree that the high-handedness of the security agencies, including the military, is one of the causes of violent extremism, then one would really understand why there are criticisms regarding the handling of Operation Safe Corridor by the military, because in the first place, there is no trust between these repentant members of this group, Jamaat al-Ahlissunnah al-Dawat wal-Jihad, and the military. So it was very difficult for them to convince them to, change their paths. It's a case of, in the first place, they never trusted them, and so there is no reason really why they should trust them at the moment. I know the argument by the military is that they are using other members of the society, including clerics, religious leaders and especially traditional rulers. And then, of course, they are also training them on vocational institutions. But where there is no trust, all of this will be a waste if they release them back into society.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there. Kabiru Adamu there for us in Abuja. Thank you. Well, let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines today across Africa. The UN's Children's Emergency Fund has launched an appeal for $3.9 billion to help support 41 million children worldwide, it says, have been affected by conflict or disaster. UNICEF said the money will be used to provide safe water, food, education and healthcare to children in 59 countries. The authorities in Sudan have ordered the release of all people who've been detained during the protests which began in December. It's thought that more than 1,000 people had been locked up as the government had tried to stop the demonstrations which were calling for an end to President Omar al-Bashir's 30-year rule. An investigation is underway in Belgium into whether some adopted Congolese children were originally abducted. Belgian prosecutors have asked for DNA samples from 15 children adopted from an orphanage in Kinshasa. British mining firm Gemfields has agreed to pay $7.5 million to people in Mozambique who went to court in London over alleged human rights abuses at a ruby mine. Nearly 300 people living near the mine in Cabo Delgado province claim they had been shot, beaten, sexually abused or unlawfully detained. Gemfields denies any responsibility but admits instances of violence have occurred. Now, in Cameroon, attempts by the opposition to hold anti-government marches in several cities over the weekend have resulted in dozens of arrests, including the main opposition politician Maurice Kamto. Rights groups are condemning the government's response and calling for the immediate release of all those detained in connection with the demonstrations. Now, you'll remember that Paul Biya was declared president in October. Turnout was lower than in previous polls, but he secured enough votes for a 7th term in office. Now, the Cameroon Renaissance movement, led by Maurice Kamto, came second. They have consistently disputed the result, holding regular demonstrations against the legitimacy of Mr. Biya's presidency. Now, Mr. Kamto and a number of his supporters were arrested on Monday. A party spokesperson has condemned the arrests, accusing President Biya of wanting to decapitate the opposition. Well, the BBC's Kilian Chimton-Gala sent this report from Yaoundé.
What we know for now is that at least 200 people have been arrested since Saturday when security forces violently put down an opposition march in Douala. Maurice Kamto, the leader of the demonstration, was picked up on Monday along with his close collaborators. They have been transferred to detention in Yaoundé. Kamto has claimed that he won the October the 7th presidential election, which saw President Paul Biya elected to a 7th consecutive term of office. Kamto supporters were marching on Saturday in protest over what they called an electoral hold-up of last year and the government's incapacity to resolve the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon.
The authorities started shooting in the air. They were shooting in the air to disperse the population. Then they chased us away, we left, and they threw tear gas at people.
The Civil Society Platform for Democracy came up with an official communique to press not only for the immediate release of all these people, but to also denounce this escalation of violence. It's time that Mr. Biya and his people initiate dialogue, that if he leaves power, because it's evident that he doesn't have control anymore.
The Minister of Communication, Rene Sadi, has accused the Kamto camp of illegal demonstrations and carrying out vast acts of assault. The Minister of Territorial Administration, Paul Atanganji, has gone as far as threatening to ban the opposition political party. Now, rights groups are saying that clamping down on opposition demonstrations reverses the gains Cameroon has made in its democracy.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, we catch up with the women's 5,000 meters world champion Helen Obiri. I'm Sophie Ikenya and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program: the BBC has been given rare access to a de-radicalization center for former Boko Haram militants in Nigeria, which the military says will successfully reintegrate participants into society. Condemnation in Cameroon as opposition leader and dozens of supporters are arrested. The gluten-free grain, teff, has been the staple food for Ethiopians for millennia. But the government and a Dutch company have been in a legal tussle for the past 7 years over its patent. The company is claiming rights to the grain, which is rich in calcium, iron and protein. But Ethiopia is now fighting to have the deal nullified. The BBC's Emmanuel Igunza explains this.
For centuries, millions of Ethiopian farmers like Fayisa have depended on growing of teff for survival. This, after all, is one of the country's cherished crops.
We plow our farmland in summer and plant it afterwards. The money I get is more than enough for my whole family, We are working, eating, and have educated our children by growing teff. Teff is great.
Teff is used to make flour, which is then used to bake injera bread, a staple food here. It is also used to make a wide range of products, including bread, pasta, biscuits, and pizzas. It is these processed teff products that have found themselves in the middle of the legal tussle between Ethiopia and a Dutch company. Over the last 14 years, Ethiopia has been trying to revoke the rights of a company which was granted a patent for the production and distribution of teff in Europe. During the signing of the deal in the early 2000s, Ethiopia believed it will not only boost its teff exports, but also enhance technology transfer and improve production. But the patent bars Ethiopia itself from selling teff products in the countries covered. Officials here say the company has simply refused to honor the terms of the contract.
We tried to negotiate with the company via the Netherlands embassy, but it's an individual, so they refused to come. What we have been doing so far is like to show that the patent is a bad patent.
In a twist to the argument, the company which originally held the patent, Health and Performance Food International, no longer exists. The person described as the inventor of teff flour and products on the patent, Yas Rusjan, is now listed as the director of another company. When I contacted that company, it said it had no comment on the issue. So injera made from teff is the staple food in Ethiopia, and they can have it with just about everything. You can see they're enjoying their meal here with fresh vegetables. I just want to find your thoughts, to find out your thoughts on what you think that teff belongs, the teff patent belongs to someone from Netherlands.
I know that injera is found only in Ethiopia. You won't find it abroad unless it's exported from here. A Dutch company owning a patent right for something that is indigenous to my country and for something that I have personally enjoyed all my life is unacceptable.
It's not surprising that these diners are fully behind the government's argument. And although full of legal twists and turns, this is one that Ethiopia doesn't want to give up. Emmanuel Igunza, BBC News, Addis Ababa.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. Mimi.
Thank you very much, Sophie. We begin in football, where the Comoros Football Federation says it's gone to the Court of Arbitration for Sport over Cameroon's participation for this summer's Africa Cup of Nations. They believe that Cameroon should be excluded from the 2019 finals as per the Confederation of African Football regulations after being stripped from hosting due to delays in preparations. Comoros are in the same qualifying group as Cameroon, whom they face in March. As we came on air, the court says that they're yet to officially receive anything from the Comoros Football Federation. An Ivory Coast defender, Ghislain Conat, has been ruled out for around 3 to 4 months. Stade de Reims have confirmed that the 23-year-old will undergo an operation on his back injury on Wednesday. It means that he will now be in a race to be fit for the Nations Cup finals this summer. Conat played in the Ivory Coast 4 qualifiers as they qualified for the tournament. The Premier League is back today with 6 matches to be played. Arsenal will be hosting Cardiff City at home at the Emirates. It's the Welsh club's first match since the small plane carrying Emiliano Sala and the pilot David Ibbotson disappeared over the English Channel last Monday. Ahead of the game, Arsenal's coach Unai Emery said they were going to remember them.
All our thoughts is to Nantes, to Cardiff, to the player and pilot family, friends, and tomorrow we are going to remember them. But after, I think, we are going to play one match with remembering this situation, but also giving together one recover for Emiliano Sala and for the pilot.
And 5,000 women's world champion Helen Obiri is determined to add a world cross-country medal to her list of honors in athletics. The Kenyan has never competed at a world cross-country event, a competition which happens every 2 years, known for Kenya and Ethiopia dominance. Obiri is the reigning African, Commonwealth and world champion over 5,000 meters, as well as a 2016 Olympic silver medalist. The 2019 World Cross-Country Championship will be held in Denmark in March, and Obiri will be seeking a ticket in the Kenyan team to be selected next month.
Looking forward at least to make the team to World Cross Country, because it's the only title I'm missing in my career. So I'm going to train, I'm going to focus. So for now I don't have any focus, it's only World Cross Country. You know, if I train now I get a good shape, it cannot sustain me to October there. Maybe I can burn myself out. So I try to do cross country so that I come back. I take a bit of break so that I can prepare well for world championships. So
wish her the best of luck there.
Indeed, and she's Kenyan, don't forget that.
You would say that, wouldn't you?
Thanks for the sport, Mimi. Thank you. Now, she is a poet, comedian, and a playwright. Habiba Ali uses rap, but blends it with buranbur. That's a famous type of Somali poetry which women dance to. She was born in Somalia and raised in Canada, but her aim is to teach young Somalis to preserve their cultural heritage. Our reporter Aisha Afra caught up with her to hear her story.
Call me Hawa Haji. In these streets, I'm a certified G. Not as in gangster, but good, don't you see? Yup, 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 that's me.
I created Hawa Haji. She's one of the characters in my plays. So we can definitely see what the amalgamation of these two art forms, Burambur, hip-hop, could look like, but she's also a social justice advocate. She's a women's rights activist. She's tribeless, she's ageless, and she has her tagline, it's not easy being Hawa Haji, because it's not easy being Somali, it's not easy being whomever. Life is difficult, we all face challenges, and I'm really excited to embark on this journey.
I invite you personally to come see this play.
I quite enjoy folklore and I quite enjoy hip-hop, so the amalgamation of the two arts also will represent me trying to bridge the intergenerational gap that I think exists between the elderly and the youth. So I'm hoping to connect the both worlds through this art forms. I've heard a lot about the folklore and the traditions and the poetry from my parents. They passed that on to me, those traditions, so I hope that I can give it back and it's not something that gets lost in the sauce, as the youth would say. So I really appreciate that, but I also have to keep in mind that I'm very ingrained with the Canadian and modern hip-hop songs and things that are very relevant, that are ingrained in popular culture.
I have 5 daily prayers that go back to back. From sunrise to sunset, they go back to back.
So Hawa Haji is the Somali woman strength that I've come to know through, whether it's integration, whether it's going to a new foreign lands, being the head of sometimes her household. All of that is what Hawa Haji encompasses and embodies.
Deal with that. Mic drop, but I'm not going to drop it because, you know, somebody asked me one day, how low can you go? I said real low, but who's going to help me back up? It's a real question.
Great sense of humor there. Well, before we go, let's take a quick look again at our top story today on Focus on Africa. A de-radicalization program in Nigeria is being offered to fighters who renounce Boko Haram. Now, the 12-month program in Gombe State is only open to men who have surrendered voluntarily and in return are granted amnesty. Now, the aim is to reintegrate the former militants back into society. During the program, they are taught vocations like shoemaking, tailoring and farming so that they can earn a living when they return home. Now, this year, more than 150 men are taking part. The government is hoping the move will, more Boko Haram militants will quit and join the program, making it less of a threat to society. And don't forget, you can get in touch with me and the rest of the team on Twitter. I am @CKenye. That's all from the program. From me and the rest of the team, thanks for your company.